I will start reading this poem, that is The Owl by Edward Thomas. I will share the poem with you, and then first I will read the poem, and then we will uh, discuss how to write the summary or the substance of this poem, and then we will try to write a critical note uh, on this poem. So let us read this poem, The Owl. It is evident from the title, as you can see, that the poem is about this bird, the owl. Downhill I came, hungry and yet not starved, cold yet had heat within me that was proof against the north wind, tired yet so that rest had seemed the sweetest thing under a roof. So in the first stanza, actually this poem is a short one, and it has 4 stanzas, as you can see, and in each stanza we find there are 4 lines. So let us consider the first stanza. So here in the first line of the first stanza, we can see that the poet is describing how he had uh, come down a hill. So he was most probably uh, going up a hill, and now after this exercise he has come down. Downhill I came, hungry and yet not starved. So he's saying that he was feeling hungry when he had come down, but he was not starved. As you know that being starved, obviously it means that to go without food for a number of days. So there is this difference that is made by the poet here between the word hungry and the word starved. So he was not starved, definitely not, but he was feeling hungry because he had not eaten for quite some time, for some hours perhaps, but he had eaten perhaps earlier in the morning. It was not that he was starved. Cold, yet had heat within me that was proof against the north wind. So he's saying that he was feeling cold, uh, but again he had enough heat within him, so warmth within him, which um, could enable him to survive the cold north wind, the icy cold north wind. Yet so that rest had seemed the sweetest thing under a roof. So he was in a condition where he had been craving, or he had been looking forward to taking rest under uh, under the roof of an inn. So he was, as you can see, he is rather describing his state, his physical state. He was hungry, he was feeling a bit cold, but still all these things, he was in control of these things. He was not starved, neither he was frozen. So in the first stanza, we can see the poet stating his physical condition. Then at the inn I had food, fire and rest. So in the first line of the second stanza, we can see that the poet is describing how he has obtained the 3 things that he was desiring, or he was wishing he would be having. That is food, because he was hungry; fire, because he was cold; and he wanted rest. after the long and arduous climb down the hill. So in the inn, he had all these three things. Knowing how hungry, cold, and tired was I. So when he had eaten, when he was sitting by the fireside, and when he was taking rest, he could understand that how hungry, cold, and tired he had been. So now that he was well fed, he was not at all feeling cold, and now he was regaining his strength and he was not tired. He could understand his, you know, condition a little while ago when he was still outside climbing down. All of the night was quite barred out except an owl's cry, a most melancholic cry. So he's saying that when he was sleeping or he was taking rest in the inn at night, uh, he did not hear anything else except the cry of this owl. And this cry appeared to be an extremely melancholic cry, a very sad cry, shaken out long and clear upon the hill. So it was sort of echoing in the hills, this cry of the owl. No note nor cause of merriment. So this cry of the owl did not bring about any sense of joy or sense of gladness in the heart of the poet, because it was not a cry that would bring joy to anyone. So he felt that, but one telling me plain what I escaped, and others could not. That night, as in I went. So he felt that this owl was communicating to him. It was telling him that you have escaped hunger, you have escaped cold, and you have escaped tiredness. And now you are resting in this inn, well fed and warm. But there were other people who were still outside in the cold, hungry, and they were not so lucky as you. So, as if the poet, he felt that the owl was saying this through this, melancholic cry. And then what happened in the last stanza of the poem? And salted was my food and my repose. Salted and sobered too by the bird's voice, speaking for all who lay under the stars, soldiers and poor, unable to rejoice. So, in the last stanza of the poem, you can see that here the poet is saying, and salted was my food. Salted meaning his food became distasteful. He did not uh, feel the same relish, the same, you can say, enjoyment when he was taking his food, when he was eating, until he had heard the cry of the owl. He was feeling quite satisfied with himself, comfortable in the inn. But now the cry of the owl was something that brought to his mind the fact that there were other people outside who were, suffering, who lay under the stars. So, salted was my food and my repose. Repose means rest. Salted and sobered too by the bird's voice. So, the bird's voice was a kind of, you can say, it was a kind of communication, some kind of message to the poet that there were people who were still outside. Unlike him, they were still suffering. So the bird was speaking. It was a kind of a spokesman, or you can say uh, a creature who was speaking for these unfortunate people. Who were they? the soldiers who were on duty outside in this cold, and the poor people who were hungry, they had not eaten, and they were also outside in the cold. So they were unable to rejoice. So they were not feeling happy or glad like the poet who had escaped hunger and cold when he had gone into the inn. So this is the poem. As you can see, it is a short poem, a simple enough poem, but it has packed in a lot of images and quite a few, you can say, uh, ideas in these lines. So obviously, uh, the poet's mood has changed. As you can see, from the first stanza to the last stanza, when we arrive at the last stanza of the poem, the mood of the poet rather, has changed from a sense of joy or glad feeling, from that to a sense of sadness, melancholy. And that was brought about by this cry of the owl. So now that we have read this poem and we have sort of grasped what is the meaning of this poem, let us now try to write the summary or the substance of this poem. So we have to take into consideration the main points here. So I will again dictate to you, and you can write down in your exercise book, take down the summary or the substance of this poem. So let us start. Uh, in this poem, the poet relates, in this poem, the poet relates how he had escaped, how he had escaped hunger and cold, hunger and cold, how he had escaped hunger and cold when he arrived at an inn, when he arrived at an inn, when he arrived at an inn down a hilly path, down a hilly path, full stop. At that time, comma, at that time, comma, he was cold, comma, at that time, comma, he was cold, comma, tired and hungry, tired and hungry, full stop. At the foothill he came upon, at the foothill he came upon an inn, inn. At the foothill he came upon an inn where he got food and shelter, where he got food and shelter, full stop. But the sudden melancholy hooting, but the sudden melancholy hooting of an owl, but the sudden melancholy hooting of an owl, the sudden melancholy hooting of an owl turned all his enjoyment at the inn sour, S-O-U-R, turned all his enjoyment at the inn sour, full stop. He soon felt sorry. He soon felt sorry for the he soon felt sorry for the unfortunate soldiers. Felt sorry for the unfortunate soldiers and the poor who were not so lucky like him. For the unfortunate soldiers and the poor who were not so lucky like him, and were suffering who were suffering of hunger and cold. Who were suffering of hunger and cold. So this is the summary or the substance of this poem, and we have incorporated the main elements, the main points of this poem in writing the summary. Now we have to write the critical note. So we have to uh, give a heading, critical note. Now write down, in this poem, the poet, the poet beautifully exploits, the image of the owl, beautifully exploits the image of the owl, which is a symbol of ill, ill, ill omen, omen. Omen means something that brings in bad luck, which is thought to be bringing bad luck. So the owl was generally considered to be something that would bring bad luck. The symbol of ill omen for rendering the poet's food, and comfort at the inn tasteless. Rendering the poet's food and comfort at the inn tasteless. Full stop. The owl's cry here pricks the conscience. The owl's cry here pricks the conscience of the poet, pricks the conscience, Pricks, pricks the conscience of the poet. Conscience spelling Conscience. Conscience of the poet, and he indirectly appeals to his readers. He indirectly appeals to his readers. Indirectly appeals to his readers to consider the plight. To consider the plight. Plight means the sad suffering. To consider the plight of the suffering people. Full stop. Make a new paragraph and write, here the tone of the poem is lyrical, lyrical. The tone of the poem is lyrical, but its mood, mood, its mood is deeply reflective. Mood is deeply reflective. Tone is lyrical, but the mood is deeply reflective. And it has a universal message. It has a universal message. Full stop. Through the symbolic representation, through the symbolic representation of the owl, symbolic representation of the owl's melancholy hooting, symbolic representation of the owl's melancholy hooting, comma, the poet tells his readers, the poet tells his readers, the poet tells his readers about the sufferings of the wretched, about the sufferings of the wretched, WRETCHED, and the soldiers, and the soldiers who fight a risky battle for existence, who fight a risky battle for existence. Full stop. Now next paragraph, the poet's presentation of the contrast, the poet's presentation of the contrast between the hungry and the starved, between the hungry and the starved, is full of tragic intensity, is full of tragic intensity. Full stop. The sorry condition, the sorry condition of suffering human beings, the sorry condition, but or you can say the sorrowful condition, the sorrowful condition of suffering humanity or human beings finds expression in the poem, finds expression in the poem. The poet uses words which are simple, the poet uses words which are simple, comma, almost colloquial, almost colloquial, full stop. Colloquial spelling COLLOQUIAL. Colloquial meaning words which are used every day, which are to be found in everyday use. The poet uses simple and colloquial words. Full stop. There are a number of images in the poem. There are a number of images in the poem. Full stop. There are the thermal images, thermal, THERMAL, thermal images. In brackets, write cold, comma, heat, comma, fire. Cold, comma, heat, comma, fire. Put a semicolon, then write gustatory image. Gustatory, GUSTATORY, that is related to taste. In brackets write sweetest, comma, salted, comma, sobered. Put these within brackets. Put another semicolon after this. Then write auditory image. Auditory, that is related to hearing. Within brackets write cry, comma, shaken out, comma, shaken out, SHAKEN, shaken out, comma, note, comma, cry, comma, shaken out, comma, note, comma, voice, comma, speaking, speaking, close the bracket and put a full stop. There are also examples of there are also examples of alliteration, 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 alliteration in the phrase, in the phrase put within inverted commas, seemed the sweetest, seemed the sweetest, comma, then another one again put within inverted commas, long and clear upon the hill, long and clear upon the hill. That is, here you have the L sound, and again a third one within inverted commas, salted and sobered. Here we have the alliteration of the S sound, salted and sobered within inverted commas, full stop. Now alliteration, as you know, it is a figure of speech. It is a figure of speech where a particular alphabet, a letter that is repeated in a group of words. So it is repeated where, as you can see in the first example, S is repeated, seemed the sweetest. In the second example, L is repeated, long and clear upon the hill. And again S is repeated in the third example, salted and sobered. Finally, write down this sentence. The poem, therefore, can be taken to be a testament. The poem, comma, therefore, comma, can be taken to be a testament, T-E-S-T-A-M-E-N-T, of the poet's feeling of sadness and sorrow, sadness and sorrow at the pitiful condition of the soldiers and the poor, of the soldiers and the poor. So this is the critical note of this poem, and we have taken into consideration the tone of the poem, how the poet is talking about the theme, how he is presenting the theme. So when you are writing the critical note, you have to read the poem a number of times. You can write the summary, but you cannot cannot add anything new to the summary, but you can add your own thoughts, your own critical insight in the critical note. So here you have the liberty to do so. So you have to read the poem first a number of times and understand the meaning of the poem. Otherwise, it would be difficult for you to write the critical notes. So always when you get the poem, you read it number of times and you mark some of the important points which you feel that should be used when you write the substance, and again you will comment on those things when you will be writing your critical note. So obviously these are the points to keep in mind. Now in our next class I will give you or show you how to write the critical note and the substance of a prose passage. So we have done the two poems, and then you have more or less, I hope you have understood what is how you should write the summary and the critical note of a poem. But now we have to look at a prose passage, which we will be doing in our next class.